watching Southwest Florida in Focus. Coming up, Florida's battle over immigration. Governor Ron DeSantis and Florida lawmakers are at odds over immigration laws, but concerns grow over the economic impact and the people affected by the changes.
The forecasts are getting better, the track forecasts have gotten a lot better, but there's always going to be a little bit of uncertainty in exactly where these storms are going to go.
Predicting the storm's path. Following 3 massive storms hitting Florida's Gulf Coast last year, one of the world's top hurricane forecasters shares lessons learned for future storms. And the Sugarcane Grinding Festival offers a glimpse into the world of old Florida, but the land that hosts the event holds a more bygone secret. Hello, I'm Sandra Viktorov. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, Florida lawmakers passed a $500 million plan to beef up illegal immigration efforts in the state. State legislators say the new measure strengthens law enforcement needed to support President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. He pledged to deport millions of people living in the country illegally. The state plan also creates an immigration czar for our state. However, Governor Ron DeSantis said he will veto the bill once it reaches his desk, claiming it would actually weaken Florida's immigration efforts.
How can I possibly sign something that is contrary to everything I've campaigned on, that's contrary to what President Trump campaigned on, that makes us a de facto sanctuary state, that neuters the operations we're doing already?
As the fight continues in Tallahassee, we look at the economic and personal impact in Florida. Another foundation almost complete in Sarasota County. For Rene Monroy and his dad Daniel, business is strong.
All along the coastline, we do big houses, big mansions all the time.
Despite steady calls for these big projects, this feels like the worst of times for the Monroys. Their time together is running out. Danielle will be deported soon.
That's going to be the hardest part, seeing my sister be without her dad.
Danielle entered the U.S. illegally when he was 16 years old.
He had no other choice to come over here. You know, there was no opportunity for him over there.
Daniel says he left his village in Mexico in desperation. His father had died while working in the U.S., and his mother struggled to feed him and his 4 siblings.
There's no food, no money, there's nothing. That's what makes us leave home.
For 30 years, Daniel has worked in construction. He and his son have laid thousands of foundations from Tallahassee to Port Charlotte. Concrete slabs for everything from stores to condos to banks.
I think we've done a lot for this country. We pay a lot of money in taxes. We do so much for him just to get kicked out. Like, he's nothing to this country.
Daniel brought his wife Santana and Renee and his older brother across the border about 20 years ago. Renee was a toddler. He has a work permit under the DACA policy. The family's hard work has paid off. They've bought several acres in rural Southwest Florida, but their dream of building a home is in jeopardy. ICE ordered Daniel to return to Mexico by March. An ankle monitor tracks his whereabouts. Ricardo Scarrett is his attorney.
He doesn't have any option. He's going to have to leave. And I don't know what he's going to do. And probably he'll return illegally. And if he gets caught, he's going to be put in jail.
While the current deportation order was under a previous U.S. administration, under the Trump White House, the family worries that the consequences of Daniel returning illegally would be more severe. This isn't Daniel's first deportation. Rene remembers his dad being deported when he was 13 years old.
My brother had to get a job where my dad worked at, almost like a grown adult, and working every day so he can pay the rent.
Making Daniel's case harder is his criminal record. He was convicted of battery in 2003, what he calls a dispute with a family member, and driving while intoxicated in 2001. But he and his family say he is a changed man.
I've made mistakes, but I haven't made them again, like driving drunk. When I made that error, I gave up alcohol forever.
He says he returned to the U.S. because of a responsibility to take care of his family.
Most of these people come from extreme poverty, and they really come to work. And that's why we need to reform our immigration laws. Most of the people that come here do not come for asylum. They come for economic reasons. And we have to recognize that. And that's always been my complaint, that the immigration laws in this country do not follow the market realities.
Scarrett says the market reality is businesses can't find enough workers, illegal or not.
It is so cumbersome for an employer to employ a foreign worker in this country that I can't blame them for hiring illegal workers, undocumented workers.
Renee says all the construction sites he's worked at rely heavily on undocumented workers. Do most of these construction business owners know that the majority of the folks working in the industry are undocumented?
Yes, everybody knows it.
Renee worries how he'll make the family budget work in his dad's absence. It's also a worry for his 17-year-old sister, Jenny, the only U.S. citizen in the family.
I worry a lot. My mom can't work. She can't go work and provide for me and her. So without my dad, we wouldn't have much things that we do now.
The family is finding the decision of what to do next impossible. Danielle living alone in Mexico, or Santana joining her husband and leaving the family as well.
He's changed as a person and doesn't do the things he once did before. And I deserve to see you one more time.
Joining us now to discuss the state's efforts to support the federal crackdown on immigration is Tom Hudson, the senior economics editor with WLRN, our sister station in Miami. Tom, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
So let's start with this. State lawmakers defied Governor Ron DeSantis by passing their own immigration bill called the Tackling and Reforming Unlawful Migration Policy, or Trump Act. What do you expect this will mean for Floridians?
Well, it does mean that there is going to be potentially more law enforcement assistance for federal immigration enforcement officials, but certainly far from what Governor DeSantis had hoped for. This is kind of continuing along the lines that we've seen with local law enforcement working with federal immigration officials, particularly when individuals are already in local custody in a local county jail, that if there is a detainer request, the local county jail will continue to hold that individual awaiting for federal immigration officials. It also allows the state to monitor local law enforcement to ensure compliance with federal immigration enforcement. It pays local law enforcement to keep those individuals in those local jails awaiting for transfer to federal custody. But it does not mandate that local law enforcement fully comply with immigration officials or face big penalties. That's something that Governor DeSantis wanted in his own immigration bill. And I think also key, it ends in-state tuition discounts for students in Florida without legal status.
So, Tom, you regularly talk to business leaders from agriculture to hospitality to construction. What are you hearing from them?
Well, business leaders are not going to come out and support breaking any law, and certainly not breaking federal immigration law. They recognize that illegal immigration is a problem, and they also recognize that there are no simple, fast solutions to it. People without legal status, we have to remember, are workers. They do contribute certainly to our community when they are working. They're consumers, they're buying goods, they're paying sales taxes, for instance, and they're business owners themselves, right? And they're hiring individuals. So a lot of business leaders that I speak with here in South Florida would like to see immigration reforms go after those without legal status committing serious crimes. And that has been something that the Trump administration has been pretty clear on.
Do we have any sense how dependent the Florida economy is on folks who are not here legally?
We do have a pretty good sense of it. Florida obviously is the third largest state by population, so it has a sizable non-citizen population. And that includes, by the way, folks that have legal status but are not citizens, but also includes those without legal status. Non-citizen immigrants are about 12% of the overall workforce. So it's significant. That's about 1 out of every 8 workers in Florida are not U.S. citizens. Now, not all of them are without legal status, we should point out. but it is concentrated in certain industries. We've highlighted the construction industry in Florida, real estate and building real estate development, such a key part of the state economy for decades. Construction has a significant representation of non-citizen workers. Almost half of those working in the agriculture industry and in the fishing industry are those people who are non-citizens. And then also 1 in 6 transportation workers. And I might add as a side, a lot of healthcare workers, particularly home healthcare workers that may be part of the gray economy, are those that may not have legal status.
Tom Hudson, we thank you for your reporting and we thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Getting a better perspective on Florida's hurricane season. Coming up, we talk to one of the leading atmospheric researchers on what the busy storm season last year says about what Southwest Floridians can expect this year. Last year, Hurricanes Debbie, Helene, and Milton devastated Florida's Gulf Coast, causing billions of dollars in damage and upending the lives of thousands of Floridians. Are so many storms in one season a fluke for our region, or do we need to be prepared for more hurricane seasons like this? Today, we are joined by one of the leading hurricane forecasters in the country, Dr. Phil Klotzbach, Senior Research Scientist for the Department of Atmospheric Science at Colorado State University. Thank you, Dr. Klotzbach, for joining us, and you gave me permission to say Phil, so I appreciate that. So welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's begin with this. You know, just last season, we were hit by 3 hurricanes. A lot of Southwest Floridians are concerned about that and wondering, is this just like a blip in the screen or something we need to anticipate on a regular basis?
Yeah, obviously it has been extremely active in Southwest Florida the last few years. Obviously Hurricane Ian in 2022, and then obviously 2023 we had Idalia, which didn't necessarily cause too much impacts all the way down in Southwest Florida, but did bring impacts to the Big Bend. And then obviously 2024 with, as you mentioned, rainfall from Debbie, and then as well as Helene and Milton causing significant impacts in Southwest Florida. Certainly it has been busy recently. I mean, Florida tends to go through periods where it can be very busy and then goes very quiet. I think a really good example of that is 2004 and 2005. So 2004, we had 4 hurricanes significantly impact the state of Florida. You had Charlie, which obviously brought very significant impacts to Southwest Florida. Then you had Francis and Jean that made landfall in pretty much almost exact same spot near Stewart on the East Coast. Then you had Ivan, which officially made landfall in Alabama, but brought very significant impacts to the Panhandle. We had 3 more hurricanes hit the state of Florida in 2005. And so we had 7 basically impacts in 2 years. And then we went 10 years, 2006, 2015, not one hurricane hit the state of Florida. Since then, starting with Hermine in 2016, it's obviously been a lot busier for the state of Florida. So Florida does tend to go through periods where it's busier and then quieter. Probably the busiest time was actually 1945 to 1950. 5 Category 4 or 5 hurricanes hit South Florida in 6 years.
Wow.
So it can get really, really busy, but then there's other periods where Florida just tends to be quieter. So, you know, it's been busy lately, but that's not a guarantee that, 2025, 2026, we're going to see more significant impacts in this region.
Are there lessons to be learned? I'm thinking, of course, the busy season, and of course, we were all impacted so much by Hurricane Ian. Are there lessons to be learned by these storms, the most recent ones, on how we need to prepare and respond to storms?
Yeah, so I think, our group at CSU does a lot with seasonal hurricane predictions, so we try to predict how busy a hurricane season is going to be. And both 2022, when Ian hit, and 2024 had some kind of unique characteristics. So 2022, we went through in August of 2022, which typically is a pretty busy month for storms. We had not one storm in the entire Atlantic the month. And so a lot of people were like, oh, this season's a dud, nothing's going to happen. And obviously Hurricane Ian hit in late September, obviously extremely impactful. 2024 similarly got off to a very busy start. Then we went through this really pronounced lull for about 5 weeks where we had very little storm activity in the Atlantic. Unfortunately, that lull, which came during the peak of the season, was broken by Hurricane Helene. And then we had Hurricane Milton follow up just a couple of weeks later. So kind of highlights how, while we have kind of these rules of thumb about how seasons perform and how they behave, you can have seasons that are very unusual. Say, for example, last year we ended up a hyperactive season, but we had a very quiet middle of the season, an extremely busy start, and a very, very busy end. We had 7 hurricanes from September 25th onwards last year, which was the most on record for the Atlantic that late in the season.
So before I was asking you if this was just sort of a blip, and as you mentioned, storm numbers can go up and down, but people have been talking a lot about intensity. Do we need, is that indisputable that, yes, we are going to see more intense storms because of a warming climate?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research that's going into that topic right now. And so one of the challenges is that when we look at our historical hurricane data sets, they may go back 100, 150 years, but there's a lot of kind of noise that can be in those trends because you have improvements in technology. Mm-hmm. So when we look at things, say, like rapid intensification, and we look, say, at kind of the typical definition that we use, which is a storm that intensifies by 35 miles per hour or more in a day. So you can think of it as basically a storm that goes from a weak tropical storm to a hurricane in one day. We don't see much of a trend in that, but if we look at a higher intensity threshold, about 60 miles per hour or more in a day, we do see a significant increasing trend in that. I think that is probably what we expect to see with climate change. As the waters are warmer, it just basically provides more fuel for storms, so be able to undergo these kind of more rapid intensifications. Now, hurricanes respond to a lot of other things as well. You can have extremely warm waters. As we saw, peak of last hurricane season, the waters were extremely warm. We had very little in the way of storm activity. So you need to have things like wind shear, that change in wind speed and direction with height in the atmosphere has to be low. You need to have enough moisture. You don't want it to be very dry if you're looking for hurricanes. And also you need to have basically systems coming off Africa at the right latitudes that they can develop and intensify. And so during the peak of the season last year, we didn't have those ingredients can come together. So that's one of the reasons why, despite extremely warm waters, we didn't see storms. But then once all those other things that were kind of holding things back kind of rectified themselves, the extremely warm water certainly helped fuel the rapid intensification events that we saw and the very busy late season overall.
Terrific. Dr. Phil Klotzbach, thank you so much for what you do. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
All those hurricanes delivered a severe blow to sand dunes here in Southwest Florida. These natural barriers provide a first line of defense against approaching weather, but storm surges have reduced some areas dramatically. WGCU's Amanda Inscore-Whittemore caught up with several groups who united to bring non-invasive plant life back to the shores.
Going out to the beach at Key Wade Island. It's part of Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. And we are collecting plant material that's part of the beach dune ecosystem. This is an important ecosystem that in Southwest Florida was almost entirely lost in some areas, especially the urban areas, during Hurricane Ian. And it was impacted by storm surge. And as we go forward, Naples Botanical Garden plays an important role in ensuring that we restore beach dunes in Southwest Florida with plant biodiversity that should be there and the genetic diversity of plant material that should be there. We're going out in the field to collect seeds and cuttings of native beach dune plants, and those plants will be brought back to the garden where we'll process them, and we'll grow those plants on with the idea that those become the foundational collection that we use to restore beach dunes across Southwest Florida. We've partnered with Florida Gulf Coast University as our research partner and with Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve to make it more available for future restoration of our beach dune ecosystem.
To be investing in a project that was really going to shore up our coastline and ensure that it protects our citizens, our beaches, our economy, while returning it to its natural environment. And then an added bonus was the involvement of all of the agencies coming together, so that it really became a true project that was influencing not just Collier County and not just our coastline, but others. And even further, it was taking it a step in saying, hey, City of Naples, hey, Collier County, let's rethink what we're requiring of our dunes. And it started to influence change. And I think that piece of it, the influencing of change, was really interesting for this to be a project for us to invest in.
Beach dunes, that mound of sand that is trapped by those plants, that's really our first line of defense against day-to-day storms and against large storms like hurricanes that we've had over the past couple of years. This beach dune restoration project is not just an environmental project. It's an economic project and it's a social project. It has significant impacts across the board.
With over 13,000 acres of strawberry fields, Florida is the second largest producer of the fruit in the country. And during the winter months, no other state harvests more of the berries than the Sunshine State. But strawberries face a plethora of hurdles, going from the farm to the produce section, from a barrage of storms and other factors. That's why experts are working on new varieties of the fruit to keep it part of a healthy diet. Joining us now is Dr. Vance Whitaker, a University of Florida professor of horticultural sciences and a strawberry breeder. Dr. Whitaker, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So if we can start with the big picture of, gosh, this storm season, how difficult has it been for strawberry growers with these back-to-back punches of Hurricanes Milton and Helene?
It has been difficult. It hit right during the middle of our planting. And so crop that was already in was damaged. And then the beds that were formed to get ready for planting, many of them were destroyed. And so it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears for strawberry growers to get the crop in the ground this year.
So my understanding is one of the big issues when you have flooding and so much just sitting water after storms like this, there's the risk of root rot. My understanding is your team, farmers have been working hard to create a new breed of plant to be more resistant to this problem.
That's right. We just released in its first commercial this year a couple of new varieties, and one of them is called Ember. And the Ember strawberry variety is more resistant to a couple of different diseases that are spread by water, either on the leaves or in the soil. And we feel it's good timing that this variety is out in the industry for the first time this year, and we really hope that it'll perform well, even in cases where there was flooding and a lot of water that impacted the plants.
For folks who don't know it, and we'll end on this, how significant or how important are strawberries to the state of Florida, and do you see that increasing, growing, improving?
So the strawberry industry actually in the last 4 years has grown by nearly 40% in Florida. And that's due to a lot of factors, but one of them is that strawberry consumption and berry consumption in general in the United States continues to increase. And Florida is basically the local source for Floridians and for the East Coast in the middle of the winter. And so that's very important.
Dr. Whitaker, we thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
After the break, finding sweetness in the history of Florida, the little-known secret about the land used for an annual tradition celebrating sugarcane. Ortona Indian Mound Park in Glades County is a hidden gem and a living connection to Florida's deep past. From a celebration of 19th century sugarcane traditions to engineering feats from the first peoples of Florida. WGCU's Tara Callaghan reveals the significance of this park as the community prepares for the 46th annual Cane Grinding Festival this weekend.
Each year in Glades County, the Cane Grinding Festival takes visitors back to the late 1800s, when Florida settlers cultivated and processed sugarcane. It's a vibrant celebration of tradition, with contests, live music, and historical demonstrations. Sugar is as important today as it was then. About half of the cane sugar produced in the U.S. comes from Florida. Towering canes of sugar are grown on acres and acres of land along the southern half of Lake Okeechobee. Kimberly Clement attended the 2023 festival with her son Kane. She's lived in Glades County for more than 3 decades.
It's very important that people in the area realize how important these farmers are. Everything you eat has sugar in it. Where does that come from? The sugar cane here goes worldwide.
This often forgotten park has a significance that reaches far beyond its sugarcane heritage, revealing an ancient world of innovation and connection. In 1988, archaeologist Bob Carr and his team uncovered large mounds and intricate canals dating back to AD 300, likely created by a tribe related to the Calusa. This ancient site once served as a vital hub for communication, trade, and travel between Lake Okeechobee and the Gulf of Mexico.
The Ortona canals, I should say, is one of the most ambitious and energetic and effective canal systems in North America that have been done by prehistoric people.
The canals were hand-dug using wooden and shell tools. The waterways were 20 feet wide and 3 to 4 feet deep, stretching over 7 miles. Though many of the mounds have been leveled due to road construction, some still remain within the park. Carr says the mounds were a solution to living in an area prone to flooding by the Caloosahatchee River.
Well, the Ortona site complex is certainly one of the most significant sites in Florida, and it's worthy of preservation and continuing for what's left of the site and for creating the narrative of that site by interpreting it in a proper way.
Visitors to this weekend's cane grinding festival can not only celebrate Florida's sugarcane traditions, but also explore the park's remaining indigenous earthworks for a unique chance to experience both history and heritage in one place. For WGCU News, I'm Tara Callaghan.
Coming up next week on Southwest Florida in Focus, the need for mental health care continues to rise, especially for seniors. How accessing mental health care has become tougher in our state and what's being done to get therapy to struggling seniors in our community. Be sure to join us for that story and much more on WGCU next week. Until then, have a great week.